Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our program today. My name is Ross Bronfenbrenner. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions with an emphasis on alumni engagement here at MAC. I am a member of the class of 2014 at Macalester, and I use he, him, his pronouns. Please pardon the logistics and housekeeping as I get started here today. I just want to make sure I cover a few things, make sure we're all on the same page. I see many of you already joining the Macalester community and sharing with panelists and participants where you're joining us from today. Very excited to see many former admissions tour guides and interns. Hello, everyone. This event is being closed captioned. Use the closed captioning link labeled as CC at the bottom of the Zoom window and click the subtitles button to show those subtitles. You will have the option to turn those on and off as well. If you do have any technical difficulties today, please use the chat box to send us a message. You can chat Macalester College directly and we'll be able to help you sort out any issues. We are very excited to answer your questions about Macalester admissions today. We collected quite a few through your registrations, and we will endeavor to do our very best to get to as many as possible. If you have additional questions you would like to ask, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window to submit a question. We will do our best to address some of those and a live Q&A portion at the end of our program. We will also use the chat feature, as you can see, to share information and additional resources we'll be talking about throughout the program. And we'd like to let you know we are recording today's program as well, and we'll have it available online in the future on the Mac Together webpage. So with all of that, before I turn it over to the agenda for the program and to many of my colleagues in admissions, I'd like to formally begin the program this evening with a land acknowledgement. We do this for many events at Macalester, and we would like to make a land acknowledgement to honor the fact that Macalester is on Dakota land. And many of us currently occupy the ancestral homelands of the native peoples who were forcibly exiled from the land because of aggressive and persistent settler colonialism. We make this acknowledgement to honor the peoples of the First Nations, their ancestors and descendants, as well as the land itself. We recognize that this acknowledgement itself is not enough and only serves as a first step towards decolonization. So thank you for beginning with our land acknowledgement. I'd like to cover an overview of our agenda for the evening right now. We will be hearing from several of my colleagues in admissions, and my thanks to them for joining us. We'll start with an overview of the class of 2024. We'll cover some changes to admissions this year and moving forwards. We'll talk about our recruitment efforts in general and perhaps how they may have shifted given the state of the world. We'll pay particular attention to our efforts that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as our recruitment efforts internationally. We will take a brief moment then to answer some of your pre-submitted questions in the Q&A before opening it up to that live Q&A as well. Wow. That was plenty of my voice for now. You've made it. Congratulations. So with that, I am going to pass the virtual microphone over to my colleague, the Vice President of Admissions and Financial Aid, Jeff Allen.
Thank you, Ross, and good evening, alumni. My name is Jeff Allen. I use he, him, his pronouns, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity to engage with you in this format. To get us started, I wanted to provide a quick overview of the fall 2020 recruitment process and the first year class, then introduce several of the most important initiatives we've got queued up for the fall 2021 enrollment cycle. When we began the fall 2020 enrollment process, we established a first year headcount target of 545 students. And tonight I'm pleased to share that we welcomed 547 new first year students to Macalester, just 2 students more than our target. We also welcomed 20 new transfer students to Macalester this fall. Unfortunately, there is not enough time for me to share how we did this. That's a story for another day, and it's a good story, one about the power of collaboration. But here are some quick highlights of the first year class that may be of interest to you. In the first year class, 13% of new students are international students. 54 countries around the world are represented among new students, and 36 languages are spoken in their homes. 18% of new first year students are first generation college students. They'll be the first in their families to graduate from college just 4 short years from now. 41% of US students identify as students of color. Among US students of color, 87 students identify as Asian, 45 as Black, 70 as Latinx, and 10 identify as Native American. 44 states are represented among new students, as well as the District of Columbia and Guam. Minnesota is well represented with 71 students, and California, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Washington are the next most well-represented states in the first-year class. The other thing I'll share is that we in admissions observe that this is a class of action verbs. New students have coordinated, orchestrated, and organized. They have designed, engineered, and pioneered. They have clarified, influenced, simplified, streamlined, strengthened, and transformed. And they have analyzed, advised, advocated, educated, evaluated, investigated, quantified, and resolved. And all of those actions and more led 547 first-year students and 20 transfer students to Macalester. We were pleased to welcome them to campus and introduce them to faculty, staff, and returning students. And now the Sisyphean adventure that is working in the enrollment profession begins again. As we work on building the next class, we are off to a good start. You may know that in a typical year, 20 to 25 students defer their enrollment from one year to the next. This year, 17 students plan to begin their Macalester adventure in January, and we must give them a very warm welcome in January. And another 61 students deferred their enrollment from this fall to next fall. That's a total of 78 students who went through the fall 2020 process, but who plan to enroll in the future. And yet, for many reasons, the fall 2021 enrollment cycle feels particularly heavy, challenging. It is true that we're off to a great start with students who deferred their enrollment. But as we build the class from this base, I should mention here that in the fall 2020 process, we had already admitted all first-year applicants by the time the campus closed down in the spring. In other words, last year applicants were further along in the college search process before experiencing any impacts caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This year is obviously very different. And you'll hear later tonight about all of the ways in which we are adapting to the new environment with all its limitations and opportunities. I should mention that to be as competitive as possible in identifying and accepting and attracting talented students this year and beyond, we have instituted a number of policy changes. The first of which is that we eliminated the $40 application fee. No longer will students applying for admission be required to submit an application fee or request a fee waiver. As you may know, we have adopted a test optional admissions strategy. This is a decision that has been under discussion for a number of years. And after research and many conversations with students, staff, faculty, and others, we've concluded that we can make sound admission decisions without requiring ACT or SAT scores from applicants. We've also decided to introduce an early action admissions round. We have retained our 2 early decision rounds. This is a binding admissions application round. And in early decision, students accepted to the institution must commit to Macalester. In early action, we will admit students early, but students will have the option to consider Macalester, choose Macalester, or other colleges all the way until the May 1st national reply deadline. And finally, we have had a division-wide focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the recruiting process. Some of those initiatives will be mentioned in just a few moments. I also want to take this opportunity now to mention the introduction this summer of the Minnesota Opportunity Scholarship Fund. This is a scholarship fund whose intention is to help Macalester enroll more underrepresented students of color from Minnesota. And it's part of recent efforts within the division and the college to attract and enroll more students of color from the great state of Minnesota. Now, one observation we often make in admissions is that talent is everywhere, opportunities are not. And that is why we feel a responsibility to do whatever is in our power to identify, recruit, admit, and enroll a diverse student body. And the efforts I mentioned just now are all part of this commitment. Here to tell you even more are my very talented admissions colleagues. And so I'll now turn the floor over to Elyan.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. My name is Elyan Paz. I'm the Director for Recruitment in Macalester's admissions office. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been at Macalester for about 7 years, and I'm really glad to be speaking with you today. So I want to share a brief summary of the past 8 months in regards to yield and recruitment. First, the Admissions and Financial Aid Division is a team. I'm going to be using we a lot, but just want to recognize that there are a whole group of people that are incredibly dedicated, caring, and motivated and make the things happen behind the scenes. And this team also includes 10 alumni. In addition to the recruitment we typically do in the fall, we do spring recruitment as well, as early as February, reaching out to students both in the US and internationally. And we really wanted to increase that coverage this year, and had planned to increase it for about 94%. But of course, things changed. And since most of these events are happening in April and May, by the end of March, we knew that we had to pivot to only online programming. So in the end, over 96 spring college fairs, case studies, and more were canceled. All of our admitted in-person programs, spring samplers, admitted student gatherings, and receptions also had to be canceled. So we made a fast pivot towards online everything, building operational platforms, communication, and learning about Zoom. So staff had a lot of one-on-one conversations with admitted students and their parents, working closely with families that due to the pandemic, parents may have lost a job or had a significant deduction in income, and our financial aid office and counselors did a remarkable job of working with families and adjusting financial aid packages as needed. Yield virtual programming consisted of over 60 Zoom meetings and webinars, handwritten notes, check-in emails, alumni videos, and even 2 podcasts. Our events team created meaningful and approachable content that highlighted our values and the amazing Macalester community. Our work with the incoming class lasted through the summer as we supported our colleagues across campus onboarding our first years. So looking at the fall, of course, our recruitment plans have had to change. High schools, CBOs, and other organizations geared towards access are quickly building platforms to connect students to us. While virtual programming allows us to go into places we haven't traditionally been, many of these schools are having the challenge of building virtual platforms without maybe the resources, the technology, or the staff to do them. So we are eager to work with the schools, and we are scheduling as we can, but also need to be mindful of how taxed and stretched our high school counselors currently are. One initiative that has received a lot of positive feedback from our high school counselors and CBO advisors, and one of my favorite initiatives has been Workshop Wednesdays. So admissions teams created and implemented over 14 workshops and webinars addressing access, understanding admissions and advocacy, with the goal that we are empowering and educating students on a sometimes confusing and intimidating process, the admissions process. So an interest in Macalester was not required. Titles include being your best advocate, navigating the college process as a first-generation scholar, and what is a liberal arts college. We're really pleased with their popularity and believe that we've engaged students previously unfamiliar with Macalester and those that may have not seen Mac as an option for them. High school counselors have thankfully been promoting them to their students. So between March to the end of October, we will have participated in close to 550 virtual programs, including individual high school visits, college fairs, case studies, CBO visits, Education USA presentations, QuestBridge presentations, and we'll have a second wave of Workshop Wednesdays planned for the fall. We've also increased our joint college programming, including we've had an existing 8 of the Best and QuestBridge partner presentations. We have a new group called Metro 5, where we partnered with 4 other selected liberal arts colleges in a city. So it's an exciting new venture for us. And we're continuing to do a lot of joint presentations with our peer colleges and also large universities, seeing that banded together, we might have a better outreach in attracting students from a variety of different parts of the country and the world. Aisha and Sarah will offer more context about diversity and inclusion in international initiatives, but do want to note that we hope that all of this recruitment leads prospective students to Macalester virtual programming. So we have live information sessions Student-led tours and interviews, chats with Macalester students have been really successful, getting our current Macalester students talking to prospective students. The mentioned workshop Wednesdays and 3 virtual fall visit programs and an exciting selection of diversity programs too. Another challenge for prospective students is reliable Wi-Fi in their homes, the availability of devices that they can use to view the programming, an example being students with limited data plans or no data plans. And so this is especially problematic in international context. This isn't a problem that we can solve, that we have a solution for, but we are doing our best to reach students in a variety of ways. So that could be by phone, it could be by Zoom, handwritten note and email, doing our best to connect with students where they are. For the last few years, we've steadily increased sending personalized note cards and emails. We'll continue that work. Our staff really enjoys the communication, and we've been told that it makes a difference. We have an exciting recruitment plan in the works. We're ready for it and we're excited for it, meeting with future Macalester students. And I'd be happy to address any questions at the end, and of course engage with any questions one-on-one as well down the road. My time is up. Again, I'd like to appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Hope everyone is safe and well where they are. And at this point, I will turn this over to Aisha. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director for Diversity and Inclusion within the Admissions Office. I guess not really that new anymore to MAC. I just finished out my first year, and I'm really excited to see what year 2 has to bring. But enough about me. Let's focus on the things that you're here to learn more about today. So as it relates to diversity, inclusion, and equity recruitment efforts, I think the biggest thing to mention is really the fellowship that was developed this last year for our diversity and inclusion fellows. These are 2 individuals who are both part of the class of 2019, so they are recent alums who have joined our team in a variety of capacities, helping with things like recruitment, application review, and other yield processes and efforts. But one of the amazing things about their role is that it's not solely dedicated to admissions work, but really also focused on that transition and the support that happens for our first year incoming students. And so this summer they were helping the Student Affairs Office and the Department of Multicultural Life to help support some of the virtual gathering spaces, leading different dialogue sessions, etc., helping with some outreach initiatives, things of that sort for that incoming class. And that is expected to continue and actually grow in this next year. Certainly not sure exactly what that's going to look like given COVID and just everyone having to pivot some of the different programming, but really think about Module 2 as that kind of timeline for working with current students as opposed to just prospective students in this process. And so with the help of the Diversity and Inclusion Fellows, we've really been able to expand upon our Minnesota visit process and really thinking about what are we doing here in our own backyard per se. So as it relates to Twin Cities recruitment, last year we had a really large goal of trying to reach as many schools as we can, wherever we could, and seeing as many people in their schools and whatnot. With that, we were able to complete 79 different visits to high schools and CBOs right within the Twin Cities metro. And this year, that goal still sits around 70 to 80, barring any major complications with access with the COVID climate. And so with that, not really pulling back on the pressure or on the presence that we have in the schools, but really thinking about how do we still meet students where they are at, as well as their families. And so that's part of that process. Another piece of that Minnesota recruitment is really thinking about the MNAC, so the Minnesota Admissions Counselors of Color organization that has a lot of partnerships and collaboration opportunities within Minnesota, particularly the Twin Cities schools, and really think about how do we connect with students in those capacities. And so this year, the MNAC fairs aren't going to be as expanded as they typically are. They've moved to a virtual format, but that is something we're continuing to partner with them on. And then also increasing our CBO, so our community-based organization presence with organizations like College Point through College Possible, Breakthrough Twin Cities, and others that we've identified as good and starting partners in this work. So that's the Minnesota visit side. The next part of the DEI recruitment strategy is really thinking about QuestBridge and what opportunities that partnership and collaboration brings there. So with our entry this past year, we had 59 QuestBridge finalists attend MAC, and 12 of those were matched finalists. What was amazing is that we had actually 2 of them were matched with us after attending our multicultural fly-in last fall. In addition to that, and think about 2021 and what we're going to do to help work with our Questies moving forward. We're figuring out ways to connect them with current MAC students who are QuestBridge finalists and QuestBridge scholars through this process. And so making things like panels available online, having other forms of outreach where they can connect with some of the leadership and the executive board around opportunities there. So they can really see what that community and cohort will look like for them once they get here. As I mentioned, the multicultural fly-in, last year we had a record-breaking number of applications. We received 203 applications, and we actually almost doubled the number of students we were able to bring on, with 40 students who attended. They represented 20 states, 3 were from Minnesota, and like I said, 2 of them were matched with us through QuestBridge. The amazing thing about that is that there's still continued interest. And so while we can't offer a physical program this year, we have really pivoted to offering expanded opportunities this fall for diversity programming. And so rather than just having a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and folks of color Saturday program that is very similar to our multicultural fly-in, we also are expanding that opportunity to other identities such as LGBTQ+ students and our first generation to college students. And so hosting these on multiple Saturdays through the month of October and November. Those sessions will largely focus on the academic setting and connecting them with faculty and other staff members on campus who also hold and share those identities with them. And then in the evening, a component where they can connect with current students who again share those identities and really seeing what an unfiltered perspective looks like. As we talk about recruitment efforts, it's really important to know that there are many different identities out there that fall under the underrepresented category. So today I'm going to largely focus on our Black and African American students, our Indigenous and Native students, as well as our Latinx students, but that there are many other initiatives that are happening and in the works to make sure that we're supporting all of our students in many different capacities. So as we talk about our Black and African American students and some of the challenges that we face, we have to be aware that we have an identity as a predominantly white institution. And what does that mean in this landscape? I mean, when you have events like George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd not so far away from our gates. And so it's really about being transparent and honest with students about that experience. And so having spaces like MAC Unfiltered, a space where they can talk to current students about the lived experience are essential into that work. In addition to that, with our COE, so our community outreach and education team within our admissions office, really thinking about that intentional building of partnerships with community-based organizations, not just attending events that they have, but also thinking about where are there opportunities for us to have more formal partnerships or collaborations with those organizations. When we talk about Indigenous and Native students and the recruitment efforts there, part of that is rebuilding some of our previously established relationships with organizations like College Horizons. We were working with College Horizons for about 13 years until about 2013. For many reasons, we had to end that partnership, and this year we returned as faculty and served in their virtual program that served 200 students across the US. In addition to that, one of our Workshop Wednesday initiatives was to have an Indigenous Community at MAC panel. So we actually had Dr. Katie Phillips, Abaki Beck, class of 2015, as well as 2 current students really speak to the community both on campus, but also off campus in the larger Twin Cities area as well. We attended places like the Native American College Fair in St. Paul to make sure that our students locally know that we are here to support them in many different ways. We'll be attending the 7th Generation Summit and College Fair with Crazy Horse Memorial and the Indian University of North America this fall, as well as increasing our presence and participation in outstate Minnesota efforts. When we talk about our Latinx students and how we're supporting them, this year we also partnered with the National Hispanic Institute as part of their college register. Through that participation, we were able to participate on 5 different panels, all focused around various aspects of the admissions process, from financial aid to testing in the COVID era, to navigating liberal arts colleges and out-of-state colleges. Attended 2 digital college fairs, as well as participated in their Collegiate World Series summer program, which was similar to College Horizons in that it's essentially an access boot camp for understanding what does it need, how do you build a successful application in this process. Through those programs, we saw over 650 attendees, and that's not including the many other students that we're seeing through some of their other pieces and work that they do. And part of this effort is also thinking about our materials and making sure that they're accessible not only to our students, but also the families, right? And so having things like translated information session, for example, in Spanish, is a project that we're currently working on with one of our fellows, as well as some of our current students who work in our office. The idea of the translation isn't just meant to be around Spanish, but will eventually grow into other opportunities as well that we'll continue to explore. But that seems as the one that seems to be as the second language most spoken in the household, the one that we want to start with. And so those are just a few of the things that I have in the few minutes that I've had to share. And I'm ready to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk more about international admissions and efforts there.
Thank you, Aisha. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Schmidt. I use she, her, hers, and I'm the Associate Director for International and Overseas Admissions. And I am starting my 4th year at Macalester. I do want to start by acknowledging the fact that I am building on and continuing the work of Jim Crowder and Steve Coley. Both contributed immensely to the international community at Mac, and I'm just really honored to be carrying on that legacy. First and foremost, I want to just re-emphasize something that Jeff has already said, which is that our commitment to recruiting and enrolling students for fall 2021 and beyond, including international students, definitely has not waned. It hasn't wavered. We are continuing to move forward. If anything, all that's been happening in the world only reinforces how vital Macalester's commitment to recruiting and supporting a global student body truly is. I will admit that the switch to virtual recruitment has its challenges. 1 a.m. virtual fairs and presentations are basically all the fun of jet lag without the good food. Plus the very real challenges that Aisha has also mentioned about lack of reliable internet for synchronous Zoom sessions. But there's also really exciting opportunities as well. So some ways that we are working to connect with and recruit students from around the globe include things like partnerships. I know this has been mentioned, but in addition to partners with our peer liberal arts and science colleges and universities for group presentations, we've also been partnering and continuing to build our relationship with different Education USA offices around the globe, as well as events through Council of International Schools, of which I am actually a volunteer committee member, and as well as international community-based organizations and HALI network organizations standing for high achieving low income, like Misangi in Cameroon, as well as Kensap in Kenya, and many more. We are also really embracing the opportunity to present a wide range of programs, from general information sessions to workshops like application case studies and tips for decoding the international college search process as part of the Workshop Wednesday series, and presenting those to a wider audience, as well as experimenting with new ways of connecting with students. So this includes not only having programs that are geared towards specific schools, but programs are geared towards specific countries or a region, or even having general programs that are open to entire time zones. We're also experimenting with offering a mix of synchronous live events, but also creating on-demand workshop video content that's going to hopefully be much easier for students to access if they have limited data available. And finally, being virtual means that we're able to incorporate participants in these virtual visits and things that we may not traditionally have through the travel process. So for example, being able to incorporate current students to offer their voices and experiences during virtual fairs and events has been really exciting. The investment in virtual conferencing technologies on a global scale and the lack of the usual limit on time and resources that are associated with traditional travel is also making it easier for us to connect with and to reach out to all the regions of the world. This includes regions that we may traditionally visit in person only every few years. For example, we were planning to visit Jamaica and do a trip to the Caribbean this fall before COVID-19 hit, but a lot of the fall travel planning, virtual travel planning is a lot more fluid this year. And so we're still relatively early in the fall, so we're continuing to add more events and plan new ways of interacting with students and counselors from all over the globe. And then finally, the opportunities for increased individual connections and support. So this includes opportunities to include more admissions counselors in international recruitment and really helping us live MAC's core values even as an office. And then I also want to acknowledge that this individual effort and connection has been just as important in supporting our new international and overseas students for this academic year, and that continues to be the case. I have been working really closely with colleagues in financial aid, ISP, and residential life as we are continuing to work on supporting our students through visa delays, travel questions, and trying to work with them to make sure that they are going to get to campus whenever that is safe and possible for them to do so. There's a lot more I could share, but I'm going to toss things back over to Ross so we can start the Q&A session. Thank you all.
And thank you, Sarah, and everyone else for the overview of our work kind of across the board here. I want to begin by acknowledging again that we're thrilled at how many questions we received in advance about many facets of our work. And my goal for this next portion here is to hopefully synthesize many of the questions we received from you all and address one question to each of my colleagues who joined us today to dig a little bit more in depth about specific areas of interest and questions that pertain to a lot of our work. So I'm going to begin with Elyan. As our Director of Recruitment, we received several questions in advance about the overall nature of our recruiting, where Macalester students come from with regard specifically to public versus private school, geography, and educational background. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to some numbers about those demographics in our pool, and perhaps how the current climate has shifted how we can engage in recruiting this fall.
Sure. Thanks, Ross. So I'm going to share some numbers, but want to note there for this last year's recruitment plan, since we're still in the process, but I'll talk a little about how it's going to change shape. But last year we physically traveled to 29 states and over 27 countries through both our spring travel and our fall travel. And when we're going into schools, we do have a lot of data. We definitely have students who come from schools, pretty routinely, but we're always on the lookout to go into different neighborhoods, different schools every time we plan for our recruitment. We're very mindful of that. We're always looking to increase our CBO engagement where we go as well. And have been fortunate to have quite a few Macalester alumni in that work that we've been able to connect with. So overall, when looking at the breakdown of schools, about 57% of the schools last year were public and charter schools, and then about 39% of those are private schools, and the rest of that filled with CBO and agency visits. So I think that the challenge will always be for us name recognition going into spaces and students knowing who we are. And so we're also having to work on that too, but we're always looking to be mindful of where we're going into spaces. Part of this work is building trust with both counselors and teachers and CBO advisors and coaches. And so it's not just a matter of saying, I'm going to go to the school because I want to see students here, but that we do have to nurture these relationships. So we do have a number of, which we didn't really talk about much today, but a number of counselor programs that do outreach to counselors so they learn more about us. That also includes CBO advisors, directors of CBOs too. So it is, it's relationship building, as you can imagine, and it becomes even more important in the international context. So we do put a lot of effort towards those relationships too. So as far as the educational backgrounds, I think that we are, we have students from so many different education systems. And so we try to read students where they are. I think in the COVID context, we have to be really mindful of what school looks like for students and how grading and classes and activities are going to change for them when we see their applications. So also being really mindful of that and letting them know that from the beginning that we are aware of the situation too. But as far as what the strategy for recruitment and reaching students, in this context, we're in a position where we actually can go to more places and go into different states and different countries and do those high school visits. But we're going to have to also deal with Zoom fatigue. And so we're going to do our best to engage them in these different places. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the challenge for the counselors and for CBOs is having to build these platforms on their own. So we're you know, going to be adding visits probably for the next couple of months. So this is definitely, as Sarah had mentioned, going to be an ongoing process to engage as many students as we can. But I do feel like this will be kind of a long-term shift, even if we do choose to, or if we no longer have to go virtual in the future, that this will still be a great tool for us when we, just based off of the number of staff that we have and the time we have to travel, be able to incorporate more virtual recruitment. Thanks.
Thank you, Elyan. Before I throw it to Jeff, I do want to acknowledge one link in the chat. There were many really great questions that were submitted in advance that had a little bit more of a quantitative bent to them, questions about certain enrollment demographics, numbers, overall trends. There was a link provided a little while ago in the chat to Macalester's Institutional Research Office, and I encourage you to take a look perhaps after the webinar for all sorts of information there that I encourage you to peruse. My next one for Jeff. Several alumni submitted questions regarding Macalester's commitment to socioeconomic diversity, especially in the COVID-19 context, and a few asked specifically about whether Macalester could return to need-blind admissions. For example, one question that came in was, under what conditions, if any, would Macalester consider restoring need-blind admissions? And I realize that is a big question, perhaps may take a few minutes to answer, but I'm wondering if you could address that question for us.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. I appreciate it. And I should lead with acknowledging to our participants that Ross shared these important questions with me yesterday, and I've spent some time thinking about a response, and that for better or worse, my response is a rather lengthy one. So I'm going to give it the attention I feel like it deserves. First, a bit of background. You probably know, as members of this community, that in 2005, Macalester made several decisions. First, the college decided to move from need-blind admissions to need-aware admissions for U.S. first-year applicants, beginning with the fall 2006 incoming class. Prior to that year, the college had already practiced need-aware admissions for international applicants and U.S. transfer applicants, but the decision in 2005 was to extend the practicing of need-aware admissions to all applicants. The other decision made in 2005 was that the college decided to continue its commitment to meeting the full demonstrated financial need of all admitted students. So one decision in 2005 was an admissions policy decision, moving from need-blind to need-aware. The other decision was a financial aid policy decision to continue to meet full demonstrated need. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, institutions practicing need-blind admissions profess to not factor in a family's financial information while making admissions decisions. And it's actually the case that the vast majority of institutions practice need-blind admissions. But, and this is an important but, there are only a handful of need-blind institutions, Amherst, Bowdoin, Brown, Pomona, only a handful of need-blind admissions institutions who also meet the full demonstrated need of all admitted students. All other need-blind institutions gap students. That is, they admit students and then do not provide the financial assistance that families need to make that institution an affordable option for the family. This is actually one reason why we read about students who have borrowed too much. They aren't always receiving the financial aid that they need. So at the moment, we practice need-aware admissions and we meet the full demonstrated need of all admitted students. What this means is that for some students, we consider the family's financial background as one factor among many that is considered in the admissions process. But when we admit students, we commit to meeting students' full financial need, whether that need is $10,000 a year or whether that need is the full cost of tuition, room, and dining. Now, since 2005, the implementation of need-aware admissions has helped the college sustain its revenue stream, and this has become increasingly more and more important as the college has become more and more a tuition-driven institution. And I also want to share the following observations regarding socioeconomic diversity and our commitment to access. In 2005, 2/3 of Macalester students received need-based aid to attend Macalester. In 2020, 2/3 of Macalester students received need-based aid to attend Macalester. And I think it's important to acknowledge that MAC has a higher percentage of students receiving financial aid than almost all of our main competitors. Secondly, the percentage of Pell Grant recipients over time has grown from around 15% of US students in 2005 to 20% or more of US students in recent enrollment cycles. And finally, we've been able to keep the average debt upon graduation for student borrowers as low as possible, the second lowest among colleges in Minnesota. So for example, for borrowers in the Macalester graduating class of 2018, the average debt at graduation was $24,480. Among Minnesota institutions, only Carleton College borrowers had lower average debt. But equally important is that 66% of the MAC class of 2018 had borrowed, 66%, whereas only 42% of Carleton grads in that year from that same class had borrowed. So it gives you some sense of some of the socioeconomic differences observed between two institutions in Minnesota. All this is to say that MAC's commitment to access through its admission and financial aid program remains as strong now as it was in 2005, and that this is a complex issue and question. But I will answer the question. Under what conditions would the college move to a need-blind admissions strategy? First, I just want to say that I really appreciate the question. I have yet to meet a single admissions professional in all of my time who works for a need-aware admissions institution who enjoys the need-aware admissions process. I don't know about my other admissions colleagues on this call, but I did not join the admissions profession to worry, stress, and lose sleep over fulfilling net tuition revenue expectations. We would much rather worry, stress, and lose sleep over rewarding talent, regardless of a student's financial background. But net tuition revenue is an important enrollment priority. It's how we pay our bills, 2/3 of which are paying faculty and staff for the education that we provide to students. So with all of that as context and background, and again, my apologies if it's too much, the simple answer to this question, under what conditions would the college move to need-blind admissions, is that we can return to need-blind admissions as soon as gifts to the college would support such a move. That is assuming that we make no changes to the college's expense line, to the education we provide, and assuming we want to continue meeting the full demonstrated need of all admitted students, we would need a sizable addition to the endowment to add enough to the financial aid budget to allow for the return to need-blind admissions. And I don't think it's an overstatement to suggest that to run a sustainable need-blind admissions operation would require minimally the addition of $200 million to the endowment today, right now. In other words, we need another DeWitt Wallace. And barring that, we need everyone to give generously to make it happen. And let me be clear, we in admissions would love to work in a need-blind, meet full need admissions context. So please call all of your friends, accept the challenge. We need your gifts in order to seriously entertain the idea of becoming need-blind again. But, and this is an important but, and it's my last comment, if new gifts to the college totaled $200 million or more, the other question the college would have to address, quite frankly, is this. If we could generate $200 million in gifts to the endowment, would we want to spend those funds on moving to need-blind admissions? Or would there be other ways of using those same gifts to improve access to a Macalester education or to improve the experience of BIPOC students and other students underrepresented in higher education. I'll just close by saying that we would really love to have the opportunity to entertain those and other questions. For now, we better move on to other questions. And apologies for the length of my response, Ross.
No apology needed. The thoroughness is appreciated. Thank you, Jeff. My next question, which is again a synthesis of many questions we received in advance, and I'd like to underscore our appreciation for the depth and the quality of those questions. Aisha, I wanted to throw this to you. Many alumni were curious about our recruitment efforts in the local area, specifically with regard to our work with underrepresented BIPOC students. I know you addressed that, the work we're doing in the Twin Cities specifically earlier, but alumni I know are also curious about our work in rural and greater Minnesota. Could you speak to the work MAC is doing to engage with Minnesota communities outside of the Twin Cities?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, you know, with our outstate areas, it's really been a big focus of ours to start with our Minnesota education fairs, because they do reach a large number of schools that typically are a little bit harder for us to get to physically, right? So with the Minnesota education fairs this last fall, we were able to add on their fall fair circuit, which allowed us to expand those efforts and to start building connections with college counselors and CBOs in those areas. This year, that certainly looks a little different. We don't have the MEF fairs in the same capacity to be able to do that, but that's not to say that we're not pursuing those opportunities. So I actually came out of a meeting just a couple hours ago with the folks who in our office all work with Minnesota students to talk about this very topic and the strategy of thinking about, you know, what is our enrollment data telling us? Where are the students that have interest in us already? And where are opportunities for us to grow and to really start to have those conversations, whether that's with high school counselors specifically or the students themselves. And so thinking about visits that we can be doing, thinking about programming initiatives that we can help offer, whether that's, you know, not just doing a MAC specific information session, for example, but maybe it's offering an iteration of our benefits of a liberal arts college presentation, things like that. So making our content a little bit more malleable and more specific to those audiences and not just assuming that, you know, what they want to hear, for example.
Absolutely, thank you. I have one more question that I would like to make sure I cover, because again, there were many pre-submitted questions. We will shift to an abbreviated lightning round of live questions here after that. But I'd like to throw one to Sarah as well. Thank you again for highlighting many of the recruiting efforts we're working on internationally. We received several questions about Mac's work, specifically in the international context. And one thing I think that alumni would benefit from hearing about based on those questions is our work with the CRSA program. So I will turn it to you and I will let you unpack that acronym as a start.
Thank you so much. So I will say the CRSA is a group of students that are specifically working with the admissions office, but also different offices and senior leadership across campus, looking at supporting and really being there for students who identify as refugees, displaced, whether that's internally displaced in their home country or externally displaced, having to leave their home country, as well as stateless persons. And so I will say that my first interaction with the CRSA group was in my very first year at Macalester, and it has been just one of the continuing ways that I'm so glad I'm at an institution like Macalester, and really the partnership that we are able to have, and then also just the care and the passion that I can see in students and alums who care very deeply about this incredibly important issue. Certainly not to take away from other underrepresented and vulnerable applicant groups as well, but really thinking about what we can be doing to become more accessible for refugee and stateless and displaced students. So I will say I'm going to speak specifically to the work that admissions has been doing. I know the student group has also been working on programs for supporting current students as well. And I'll say the work is ongoing, like everything. We haven't achieved, I think, all of our goals, but I will say we are making really tangible steps towards creating that, that space and those opportunities. So some things that we've been doing include comprehensive training for our own admissions staff in how to identify as well as better understand the context of students who have these experiences and identities in the application process as they're reading applications, and understanding that just because a student is not an official US refugee, that there are still students that are being impacted by displacement and statelessness around the globe. We're also have worked on creating a process for better tracking. And so actually being able to identify students that are in these categories so we can better understand how we're doing in terms of our application numbers, as well as how many students that we're accepting and ultimately enrolling. This work has also included creating more visible information on our admissions website to help students understand the admissions process, and also just to be that visual affirmation that Macalester welcomes and supports applicants with these identities. And then very exciting, especially this year, certainly some of the broader changes that Elyan and Jeff have been talking about that are going to be benefiting all of our applicants are also definitely going to help support refugee and displaced students as well. Things like no longer requiring an ACT or an SAT, the elimination of the application fee, as well as providing more equitable opportunities for presenting English proficiency. We have, since last year, been taking the Duolingo English test in lieu of TOEFL or IELTS, which is a much more accessible English proficiency test option for students, and in many cases can even be taken for free. And our efforts are starting to show some results. I did a quick look today, and this year's incoming class, we actually have 11 students who identify as or meet the definition of being a refugee, being displaced, whether that's externally or internally, or being stateless. And they really represent the globe. We have refugee and displaced students from the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, as well as Central Asia. So I will leave it there, but again, something that we're continuing to work on. It's definitely not, we're not done yet, but I'm very excited about the direction that we're taking.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Lightning round. I want to make sure I get to as many of your live submitted questions, and thank you for those as well. Again, my job as moderator today will be to synthesize. So panelists, I apologize in advance for asking you 3 questions without stopping and presumably not using punctuation. Elyan, you've drawn the short straw. Here's the first one. Early action, expanding on that a little bit. A couple of questions about, is it better for a student to do early action if they're very interested in Mac, but maybe not able to do early decision? Is merit aid available to early action candidates in the same way? Maybe perhaps for our alumni who are working with students and may be trying to talk about this early action term. Can we expand upon it a little bit to give our alumni that knowledge?
Sure, thanks, Ross. So, I mean, students need to feel comfortable with when they're applying and what round they're choosing. And so, I'm pleased that we have 3 different options for them. So we're meeting where they are and where their comfort level is. And for some students, they know Macalester's their #1 school. They want to apply ED. We do have an early financial aid assessment that we're offering to students who are curious about possible financial aid packages. Early action, I think for some students, they like the comfort of being able to know earlier. So decisions will be released in December. They'll have a financial aid package that they can compare to other institutions too, and just like the comfort level of that. But as far as merit scholarship, it's not going to run out. I think that's sometimes a concern that students have, that, well, if I apply ED or EA, will there be money left for regular decision? And that's just not how our financial aid works. So we're looking for, amazing students. We always have more amazing students than we could admit. But we'll find, I think with having early action as a new option, I think it'll be exciting to see what it looks like. We just don't know yet any more of the benefits, but I think we're really excited in seeing those applications a little bit earlier. And also just as far as accessibility, offering students more options. And I think for some students, it's hard to tell, but in this context may feel comfort in just knowing earlier that they've been admitted to a top choice college that isn't through an early decision round. So I know next year we'll have more to share on what early action looked like. So hope we can do this again.
Awesome, thank you. Sarah, lightning round to you. Internationally specific question, and I know the answer to this one as someone who recruits students, but I'd like to hear it from you. Does Mac still have a relationship with United World Colleges, and what role does that play in our international recruitment process as well?
Absolutely. I think our relationship with United World Colleges as well as with the Davis Foundation, and again, just really thankful to Jim Crowder, who is really kind of the architect of that relationship, and so really paying respects to his great vision. But the recruiting students from the United World Colleges continues to be a strong part of our overall international recruitment strategy. It's not the only part. I think we're also very aware that there are great talented students from a variety of contexts who don't have the opportunity to attend a United World College. So we're really cognizant of trying to find that balance. But I will say, United World College students still continue to make great contributions to the Macalester community. And especially as we have been in these uncertain times, I will say our first year class probably would not have the international diversity that we are enjoying right now if we did not have that relationship with the UWCs and the Davis Foundation. In fact, this year I think we outdid ourselves, and not counting the 2 students who are deferring to 2021, we have, I think, about 29 or 30 who are either remotely or actually made it to campus or through a combination of hybrid are starting, and I believe they represent 12 of the UWC campuses. So absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah. And I am not at all surprised that you have information like that just off the cuff. You can do that with pretty much anything international, and that that didn't surprise me at all. Jeff used all his time with his previous answer, so I'm going to Aisha. Aisha, there's a question in here. You spoke a little bit about kind of those specific programs geared toward BIPOC students, underrepresented students. There's a question about the invitation process to those, how students are perhaps identified for those programs, how we might be advertising them. I'm wondering if you can speak perhaps kind of writ large to our efforts of making sure that we're not only putting on programming, but that programming is well known and inclusive and comprehensive.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that was part of the process of moving to this online and virtual format this year, was thinking about, having an application for these programs is not necessary. We don't have a budget that, sets how many students we can bring to campus, right? So really being able to provide these programmings more at large and to all of the populations, and being able to put them either, by email, putting them on our website. So developing a space on our website that actually pulls together all of these DEI related initiatives is also part of the work that we are doing. So it's one landing space for students to get to this information. It's communicating it with the college counselors, talking about it during our high school visits, connecting with our CBO organizations, in our one-on-one interviews with students, making sure that we're highlighting this programming. So at every point that we can, essentially touch and talk about these things, that's what we are doing as a team. And it's not all just on, myself or the fellows. It is the work of all of us in our office, which I really appreciate. So.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Aisha. Yeah, and certainly that's something that I think all of us in admissions underscore, that this work is all of our work. And I'm really glad to hear that and be a part of that. I want to be cognizant of time and wrap up our session relatively soon. I will keep my closing remarks brief, but I would like to end in an unusual fashion with an introduction. So hi, I'm Ross. I did the brief intro at the beginning, but I did want to formally identify myself as a resource and a connection to the Macalester Admissions Office. Much like many of you, my office is my living room. Much like many of my colleagues in admissions, I check my email both like it's going out of style and it's a hobby. It's a fun balance that I'm never gonna really fully work out. And a distinct and exciting part of my work in admissions is to help build a bridge between our alumni community and our admissions process. And that can be done with an introductory email, that can be done with a brief hello, that can be a question that may not have gotten answered today, and I'd love to continue or begin that conversation down the road. And certainly the admissions process will look different this year. But I'm sure that you are excited to hear right now that you have been volunteered by me to receive an email from me later next week about opportunities moving forward for alumni to engage in this process. I'll acknowledge that the lion's share of that work has in previous cycles been interviews, which pose a bit of a challenge this year, given that many students already have so many obligatory Zoom conversations that the efficacy of adding another one can be a challenge. But I'm really excited to share with you, and I will again next week, no need to follow up. I will follow up with you, some opportunities to engage with our work moving forward. A sneak preview there. Two things that I think will be impactful. One is a term you've heard throughout our session this evening, is that work in yield, that idea of converting admitted students into enrolled students. And with this new early action round as a perfect example, yield season is 5 months long, and we could really use your help. Not only sharing that perspective, a personalized hello, a greeting from an alum who majored in a potential area of interest or who calls the same area home can really go a long way, and I'd love to work with folks on that. The second piece is that our online presence at Macalester is more important than ever. And I'll share some language and some opportunities and some ways that you can share your genuine, authentic Macalester experience with our prospective students and families, the vast majority of whom haven't been able to visit campus and will really get that incredibly important first impression of Macalester from an online forum or a web page or something that we could do a really great job of populating with authentic, positive, engaged alumni voices. That's a really exciting project for me. I'd love to work with you on that as well. All told, I'd like to end with a thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment to your alma mater. Thank you for your interest in engaging in this work. Thank you for attending a non-mandatory Zoom session. That's the most bonus points right there. So from all of us in admissions, all of us in alumni engagement, all of us in St. Paul, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There will be more ways to connect, more ways to engage. We genuinely, really, truly hope those happen early and often. So again, thank you for your time, for your support. And we will see you presumably on Zoom sometime soon.